Mains topic. The first thing we will discuss is digital constitutionalism, and the second article we will discuss talks about labor codes, how labor codes are beneficial for both employees as well as employers. Okay. So, the first article came in the Hindu, a growing shadow over digital constitutionalism. In this article, the recent rollback of Sanchar Saarthi app and the mandatory Sanchar Saarthi app, which triggered some concerns in various citizen groups and all intellectuals about digital constitutionalism, how we can protect our constitutional rights, our constitutional freedoms in a space which is entangled digitally. Okay. So, this article talks about digital constitutionalism. Now, okay. So, first, what is digital constitutionalism? The application of constitutional principles like liberty, privacy, equality, justice into digital governance and technological system is known as digital constitutionalism. That means constitutional principles into digital space. And why this is concerning or why this is very difficult to handle is because of these issues. Okay. Why the crisis? Why everyone talks about digital constitutionalism? Now, this is not happening in India, but across world there have been allegations of government using data of citizens for monitoring or snooping. Okay. Countries like North Korea face this. There are certain countries which are dictatorial regimes which face this problem. Data centralization, all our data from eyes to fingerprints to our speech, to what we think, what we say, all this is present in data centers. And there is a centralized data center where all this data is available, which can be easily exploited. Now, AI driven systems nowadays decide what we think. Sometimes it is said that it is the AI which drives the humans. It's not the, there is a possibility that there will be a time when AI drives our thinking. Sometimes we look into advertisements, sometimes we look into things, and that model itself, that working model itself in the app drives our choices. So, our choices are overshadowed by algorithms and driven system, and our traditional constitutional protections are not keeping up to the changing dynamics. That is why this whole debate of digital constitutionalism arises. So, the core question in our mind is, how do we protect our fundamental rights in an increasingly digital world where data collection, artificial intelligence and surveillance technologies are becoming omnipresent. They are present everywhere. Our data is present in every app, right from apps like Instagram, apps like Snapchat, to apps like Sanchar Saarthi or Aadhaar database. Everywhere our data is there. So, how do we protect our rights, our constitutional rights in this scenario? So, this is the question to ponder upon. Okay. Now, since our data is everywhere, omnipresent, what are the concerns we face? There are concerns of mass surveillance, as we discussed, facial recognition, digital ID, monitoring, tracking citizens. Cyber security is another thing. Cyber security issues since our data is logged in a database or a server, cyber attacks can expose this data to everyone. So there is no privacy for our data. Regulatory gap. In India, in other countries, there are gaps in regulations due to which data protection, the legal framework of data protection is very weak, and algorithmic bias, that is AI system used for decision making etc. have a inherent bias or discrimination in them. Okay. So, how these technologies are reshaping our governance infrastructure? Facial recognition, we have seen that facial recognition is used in border control, tracking, law enforcement, and there is no strong legal framework which prevents any sort of surveillance. Okay. Second is social media monitoring. Our social media is already getting tracked. Digital identity and Aadhaar systems are all our features, starting from our iris to our fingerprints, everything is there on Aadhaar systems, which is also vulnerable to cyber attacks. So, this is where data constitutionalism comes into play, and with this we have to discuss why our legal systems fall short in preventing or protecting our rights in this digital governance and digital age. Okay. The Constitution was written in 1950s and it did not address the digital rights, the digital privacy, which is a new phenomena, algorithmic justice, data rights. So, there is nothing in the Constitution which explicitly protects us. It is the Supreme Court through its interpretation of the Constitution which provided us right to privacy under Article 21. So, the constitutional framework does not provide us anything. Fragmented laws, again a very important point. Due to multiple laws, there remain regulatory and enforcement gaps. Because of these fragmented laws, there remain regulatory and enforcement gaps which prevent the protection of our data rights. And courts as well as the investigation agencies struggle to keep up pace with the technology, and there is no inadequate penalties for violations. There is very limited time for redressal. So, all these things have led to a phenomena where our constitutional rights are in danger in a digital framework. Okay. So, what can we do or what can our government do? Okay. We can come up with constitutional amendments to ready our constitution with rights which are digital in nature. For example, right to privacy, as right to education was added to constitution, right to privacy can also be added into our constitution, so that it gives a constitutional touch to the right. Data protection and accountability should be very comprehensive. Data protection rights should be very comprehensive. Every citizen through citizen charter should know what are the data protection right he or she possesses. Independent commissions as watchdog of cyber security issues, of allegations into data privacy, data breach, all these accidents, all these incidents should be investigated by digital rights watchdog, which should be independent of government interference also. Global alignment, we can learn from the GDPR model, EU's GDPR model, which gives certain amount of rights to the citizens over their data, and international digital right standards. Okay. What are the judicial and institutional strengths? Our judiciary, our courts need to be tech savvy to understand the implications of data breach, to understand the implication of, to understand why our rights, why our constitutional rights, how our constitutional rights will survive in digital governance as well as digital space, to handle digital cases. Fast track digital trial redressal. Okay. And how can we ensure a protection of our rights? Again, through a strong cyber defense, cyber offense, as well as cyber security framework. We should know how to protect our data, cyber defense. We should know how to initiate inquiry or repel back to the perpetrators through cyber offense, and we should know how to secure our data through cyber security. Okay? In tech policy designing, like while we are designing rules and frameworks for digital protection rights and everything, we should ensure public participation. The surveillance systems, the Aadhaar systems, or bank systems, all those systems which have some sort of digital data or into it should be regularly audited by organizations like certain. And citizens should be given the right to know about their data. Citizens should have the right to decide where my data should go, where it should not go. Citizens should be the ultimate authority over data. Along with this, the government should have an oversight over the apps which are utilized by the corporates. So, our data should be in our own hands. The government should ensure that data is not taken away or breached. So, the digital constitution we need. Digital rights are human rights in the new form. As technology becomes woven into every aspect of our governance and daily life, constitutional protections must also evolve with time. India must craft an digital constitution that guards individual autonomy, ensures transparency, and holds both the government as well as the tech companies accountable for their data, ensuring that in our increasingly digital world, fundamental freedoms, fundamental rights, constitutional values are effectively protected. This was the crux of this article. Second article. Second article is about new labor codes, a win-win for workers and employees. Okay. Recently, in November, Government of India implemented the labor codes. Okay. And these labor codes effectively consolidated 29 labor laws into 4 labor codes. Okay. This is the mains PYQ which was discussed in, which was related to the 4 labor codes. In 2024 only this came, that discussed the merits and demerits of the 4 labor codes in the context of labor market reforms in India. What has been the progress so far in this regard? Okay. So, what this article talks about is a shift, a major shift from a fragmented, restrictive system to a unified framework that can boost formalization, investment and job creation. This article talks how the 4 labor codes are a win-win situation for employees as well as employers. Okay. So, first we will discuss how these labor codes evolved across time. From 1947 till now, there have been a spree of multiple labor laws. Okay. Due to this multiplicity of labor laws, there was a restrictive regulation. So, because of this multiplicity, different parameters for implementation of different laws, the regulation became little restrictive, which discouraged firm growth, formalization and job creation. Okay. For example, there was a different parameter for Minimum Wages Act. There was a different parameter for Contract Regulation Act 1970. For example, out workers were included in Minimum Wage Act, but out workers were excluded from Contract Regulation Act 1970. Okay. Similarly, the definition of child is different in Child and Adolescents Act and the Factories Act. Prevention of Child Labour Act and Factories Act. The definition of child is different in both the acts. Some acts, the threshold was 15,000, for example, Payment of Gratuity Act. Okay. For some act, the threshold was 21,000. Okay. So, there for some act the threshold was 24,000. The definition of factory, the definition of establishment, everything changes with act. So, there was a lot of fragmentation in our acts, which restricted regulatory regulations also, and which restricted the formalization also. What did they do is, it led to a large informal sector developing, where there was no act, there was no regulation, there was no security. All people worked in a informal setup. So, there was a need that all these outdated labor laws should be consolidated, and this happened with the 4 new codes. Okay. So, what were the challenges before the pre-codes era? The challenges have been discussed very nicely. The first challenge was the productive firms deliberated stayed smaller than optimal, fearing regulatory burdens if they grew. So, they remained small. This was the dwarf effect, which was discussed few years ago in economic survey, that the agencies or the productive firms which had the potential of growing also stayed small, fearing that regulatory burdens on them might grow. Second, India became a country of micro and small informal units which lacked access to technology, capital and skill. Unlike China, our microsystem of industries did not grew to be a pillar of growth. Rather, it remained informal in nature and lacked access to capital, skilled workforce and technology. And third, the unionized workers were somewhere protected, but the workers who did not have formal jobs or who were working in informal setup, who required the protection, were never taken care of. So these were the issues. These are the 4 codes. Okay. Now, with the coming of these bills, both the workers as well as the employers gained. How? See, the Code of Wages 2019 ensures that minimum wage should be for all employees, both organized as well as unorganized sector. Earlier, the Minimum Wages Act was only applicable to scheduled employment, and it covered only 30% of the workforce. Okay, but now this Minimum Wage Act provides minimum wage to all employees, irrespective of industry, category, nature, anything. Okay. So, a uniform legal safeguard is there nationwide. There is no discrepancy, there is no different interpretation. So, the regulatory effectiveness increases. Okay. Casual workers, daily workers, migrant laborers, all these people who really need protection, who really need that social security are covered. Okay. But from the employment provision point of view, from the employer's point of view, we can see that workforce participation will improve. When you know you are going into a formal setup, when you know you have social security available there, more and more skilled workers will come to the industry, and that skill industry gap will shorten. Okay. Job stability, retention improves, boost employment growth and growth of the okay. What employers gain into this? Now they know what are the regulations. They have a fair idea of what regulations they have to follow. So, better implementation will be done. Okay. Flexibility, the hire and fire thing. The fixed term employment, as we say in these codes, has been introduced, so that the notice requirement before retrenchment or before layoff, so 60 days or 90 days notice requirement. The notice requirement is not there if you are keeping a particular employee for fixed term. So there is a flexibility. So more and more companies are flexible now to employ whoever they want to employ. The compliance costed, because they know what to comply, they will lower down, significantly lower down. The business growth will improve. They will want to extend themselves, or they'll want to grow to their optimal level, expanding the industries, and reduced uncertainty. The overall uncertainty in the labor market will reduce. Okay. This is flexibility. Industrial Relation Code introduces greater flexibility in hiring the workforce and management, while maintaining protection against arbitrary dismissals. And the process of layoff and retrenchment in medium-sized firms has significantly streamlined. Okay. Worker protections remain intact, so there is a dispute resolution mechanism available, so that these employers cannot misuse whatever flexibility they have got. A very good example of this is, if a fixed term employee or a casual worker has worked for more than 1 year in continuous service, that is 240 days out of 360 days. This is continuous service excluding layoff period, excluding lockout periods, excluding maternity periods. So, this is continuous service. So, if you have completed 1 year of continuous service, you are eligible for gratuity. Okay. This was 5 years earlier. You have to do a continuous service of 5 years to be eligible for gratuity, but this now has been changed to 1 year. So, the rights and protection has expanded, but you have given employers a particular option of high fixed term. You can employ someone for the fixed term without getting into a hassle of notice giving and all these things. Along with this, worker protection remains intact. So, there is a rules based environment for both workers as well as employers. Now, along with this, the workplaces, with coming of these 4 codes, the workplaces will become more secure, more modern and more safer. So, occupational and safety code consolidates safety and health regulations across sectors and establish clear standards on working conditions. This also I will give you an example. For building constructors, construction workers, the requirement of toilets is different from what was the requirement of toilets in Factories Act. Okay. So, this differential created problems. Now, with the single code coming, you know what are the working requirements, you know how much emission is allowed, you know what is the per worker area you have to provide for every worker in any space. So, a safer and modern workplace will be there. Second, because of this modern safety rules, the quality of work will improve, production, productivity both will improve. As safer environment will be given, this will encourage workers to work more. There will be more dignity and protection for the workers. Okay. This is significant in construction, as I told you, mining, manufacturing and transportation, where outdated and fragmented laws created confusion. Okay. This you can note down. Okay. Now, one quality thing about introduction of these 4 codes is the implementation and compliance has been very smooth. For example, from 2020, not all codes were implemented, all provisions of all codes were not implemented. The power was given to the appropriate government to implement the code whenever they feel it is necessary. So, the implementation was phased. So, there was no abruption, everyone knew what is coming. Industry has had time to understand things, industry had time to know about these laws, as well as the workers and worker association knew what is coming. Okay. They could give their input, they could provide suggestion to the government for amendment. So, it was a phased implementation. Second, the compliance portal for all codes will be a single portal. You know, if you go to a particular website or a particular portal, you can see all compliances you want to. Okay. Grievance filing, dispute resolution, worker registration, all these were very outdated in earlier labor laws. If I tell you, you had to file to appropriate authority 90 days, there was some acts where 90 days time period was given, then 30 days time period, then you have to give 15 days ka time period for registration of employees. So, multiple laws had multiple issues where registration, grievance filing was an issue. For example, Employee Compensation Act. You had to file a compensation for death or permanent disability. So this whole process was very complicated. For airmen it was different, for seamen it was different, for workers there was a threshold time given. So this grievance redressal, dispute, everything was very haphazard in our acts, but this digital framework will come into picture with this code, and you can have a stronger, swifter, faster dispute resolution, grievance redressal, worker redressal, etc. And training programs for the firms and workers on new provision. Earlier I think the trade unions could utilize 25% of their funds into skill development. Now training programs, skill development or rights, to know about their rights, for better knowing of their rights. Now this capacity building, there was ample time for these agencies to come in and educate workers, educate employers, negotiate with employers over their rights and implementation of new provision. Okay. So as we discussed, the implementation of 4 codes is a win-win scenario for economic growth, for worker protection, as well as rule-based environment and employers. This was the crux of the second article. With this, we end the discussion of mains related topic for today's DNA. Thank you. Thank you very much.